Twilight gets a puppy. By TDR. Poster's note. There is a link for a YouTube video in the story. At the point of the link it says music link. End poster's note. Chapter 60. Swarm of 456 years. Part 3. The mares peered expectantly past Spike into the library after the little dragon had opened the door for them. Bets had been taken prior to knocking. Applejack had expected disaster with parasprites trashing the place. Rarity had expected the little bugs to be helping Spike and Twilight sort things, mostly as she thought that Twilight didn't have the same revulsion of the creatures as she did. Rainbow Dash had expected a bloodbath with Ross having gorged on the extra creatures. Unfortunately it seemed that Fluttershy won the 20-bit pool as the library was undamaged and there was only one parasprite present. The little blue bug was inside a small bird cage and was plastered to the bars as far away from the pair sitting on the couch studying it as it could get. Small bits of food rested on the table around the cage along with a collection of odd science-y devices and numerous pages of notes. Of course Ross and Twilight were arguing as well. All I'm saying is, tastes like a peach gumball is not a valid description for a field guide. Twilight fussed. Bark. Ross countered. Yes, I know the field guides he writes for animals also include the flavor of them, but we should not be taking advice from a stallion named after a woodland predator who, when in an emergency situation, any emergency situation, drinks his own urine. Twilight pointed out. The four mares stared at the pair, not sure what conversation they walked into before all of them looked at Spike. Better you don't ask. Anyway, if you're here for the squeeze box we had in storage, Pinkie Pie already came by and took the instrument. Spike sighed. Mama had a squeeze box. Daddy never slept at night. Fluttershy quietly mused. No Spiky, we are not. What happened here? Rarity broached the subject carefully. I'm not going to be the one to explain this nonsense. Spike turned back to the pair. Twilight Parasprite lecture time again. They wanna know what's going on. Ross groaned and buried his head in his paws as Spike wandered off to the kitchen. Twilight perked up noticing the girls for the first time and smiled. It was at that point when the others finally saw she was wearing a lab coat. Oh, it's been a great investigation. I woke up this morning and there were dozens of them all over the place. It wasn't great, they were making a mess, but we quickly fixed that after I put the original in the cage here. With so many to experiment on, I've got a full biological life profile including skeletal, for what it's worth, and neurological systems. But the really interesting thing is the digestive system. It utilizes a version of Quid's theorem that has only a 3% waste rate. 47% of all material ingested goes towards maintaining the system, with the other 50% going completely into reproduction. If the parasprite eats something the same size as itself, like a berry, then it has to eat something else of equal size in order to produce a second parasprite, so like 2 berries. Given that it can distend its mouth open larger than its whole body, however, it can eat things up to 3 times its own size. The skeletal system is really just a brain case with a small flexible spine that has connections to the wings. Everything else is a fleshy, stretchy cartilage, so it might be able to eat things even bigger than that. We haven't tested it fully as I have no idea where to get a watermelon this time of year. And it's too early for pumpkins. Twilight rambled. I am learning so much. Skeletal and digestive. Are you dissecting these things? Rarity asked, making a disgusted face. Only about a dozen of them. I've a simple fly-killing spell that works just as well, and Fluttershy is behind you on the ground, isn't she? Twilight trailed off, looking back by the girl's legs. Looking down, the yellow mare was passed out on the ground at the thought her friend had been cutting open the parasprites to see what made them tick. The other girls looked back at the fainted Fluttershy, then ignored her again. Every pony was still mad after all. That's pretty hardcore, Twilight. Rainbow Dash stated. Yet trying to do that with a frog back in school made me squeamish. Applejack admitted as Rarity frowned, glaring at the farm mare for some reason. You do realize that when Ross first learned to hunt on his own, I had to cut up and fix his meals. Mom and Dad wouldn't touch them and shining armor wasn't always around. Twilight shrugged. This was a little different from that given Ross ate them all after I was done as well as the ones I hadn't tested. Rainbow Dash looked at the Moondog curiously. So what did these taste like? He said various flavors of gumball depending on the color. Everything from cherry to ginger so far. Spike added, coming out of the kitchen with a tray of tea for everyone. Rarity took note that the small bug had yet to pull itself away from the back of its cage despite eyeing the food that was left for it. The bug wasn't just afraid of Ross either. Twilight dear. How many parasprites have you cut open? Rarity asked. About a dozen I think. Twilight admitted. They were humanely killed before I did that however. I'm not a monster. Rarity nodded before looking at Spike. Spike. Closer to about 40 I think. Spike added. But I lost count when she started trying to see if color changed any of their internal layout. It doesn't. Oh. I did. Twilight muttered. And how many has Ross eaten? Applejack questioned. I'll put it this way, see those scraps on the table? That's all the food that's left in the house, and we just went shopping yesterday morning. Spike grumbled. At least Ross is well fed. The three mares looked back over at Twilight and Ross. The former seemed to be wondering what she did wrong and the latter was trying to look innocent. None of the girls were buying it. This explains why they're all avoiding this place. Applejack sighed. And this is what I live with. Spike sighed, passing out the tea. Ross got off the couch and moved over to check on Fluttershy since no pony else was. Don't start with me again, Buster. Twilight accused, pointing a hoof at Spike. With as fast as these things reproduce, it's better to know everything we can about them in case they decide to swarm or there's a reduction of their natural predators. They eat anything even remotely resembling food. Like that horseradish cheese dip you made the other day. Spike snarked. That was almost food. Pinkie Pie gave me that recipe, thank you very much. Twilight snapped. Anyway, the parasprites reproduce at such a rate that using a few of them as test subjects is only objectionable if is not conducted humanely. Or if it's done on something that is endangered or can communicate its own defense, pleading to Fluttershy notwithstanding. It's also not objectionable if the creature in question is a threat to pony kind. Twilight trailed off, looking at the girls as if seeing them for the first time clearly. You're not here to raise a fuss about my research, are you? Twilight asked. Fluttershy might, but I'm not planning on it. Dash snorted. I'm so used to someone causing a fuss. Rarity, Rainbow Dash, what happened to the parasprites I gave you yesterday? Twilight asked. Well. It's like this, darling, Rarity stammered. Twilight slapped her face with her hoof as she looked to her brother, who had turned from Fluttershy and was looking out the door. Ross, how bad is it? Twilight groaned, rubbing the bridge of her nose with a hoof. Woof. Ross grumbled. Okay, only level 2 theorized, we can handle that I think. Twilight sat down hard and rested her hoof on her chin as she started thinking. Plan 4B. Bark. Ross shook his head. Too many of them. Plan R9. Twilight suggested. Applejack watched the pair of them for a moment before leaning over to question Spike. What the hey are they talking about? Applejack asked. They made plans in case of a disaster. Twilight calls it creative brainstorming, I call it game ideas galore. Spike admitted. But what does she mean level 2? Rarity asked. Danger scale. It's actually a guard thing. It goes from 5 to 0, then from 0 to 5. Anything before 0 is a potential disaster rating or PDR. The lower the number, the closer it is to being a disaster. 0 is a disaster is happening, but it's not rated yet. 1 to 5 above that is the level of disaster rating or DR. A1 is light damage and minor injuries, A2 is moderate damage and injuries with possible heavy damage or death. A3 is certain death and serious damage, A4 is mass extinction and continental damage. A5 is the end of the world. There's decimal points in there too, so we can have a 3.3 for instance, but we've really never had anything beyond a 2 or 3 that I can recall. Woof. Ross added. Okay, but she was only a potential 5, Nightmare Moon got stopped before she put out the sun. She never got past a 1 dr. Spike sighed. Every time I think I understand you three, something happens and I find out stuff like you're making plans for the end of the world. Rainbow Dash shook her head. This is my life. Spike sighed. Asterisk. Q8, Amalthea's plight. Twilight suggested. Sure, if you want to burn out again and make them all depressed. Spike scoffed. Besides, with how they reproduce, wouldn't they just double their efforts to make more of themselves if they think they are the last one? Good point. It's mostly for defense anyway. Something can't attack you if it's too depressed to do so. Twilight admitted. I7, Ignil's immolate. Nope, remember what happened when the one got too close to a candle last night? Now imagine that across a town that has not been fireproofed like the library. Spike countered. True, he lasted a good 20 minutes before we put him out as well. Then he ate the candle, Twilight muttered. They're fireproof. Rainbow Dash gasped. Fire resistant, but we didn't check the length of time they would burn for obvious reasons. I also couldn't test on a fresh body as Ross kept eating them. Twilight explained as Fluttershy fainted again. The group of them, minus Applejack and Ross, stood outside of Sugar Cube Corner watching the chaos of the bugs running around looking for food. With Twilight outside of the shop, the Parasprites were giving it a wide berth, allowing the cakes to finally relax a little. Applejack had drug Ross off almost as soon as she found out the bugs avoided him, in order to protect her orchards, which left the rest of them to figure out how to fix this problem. For Twilight, that was to consider spells while Spike shot them down. Age 12, Mentalk's marvelous mind-taking. Twilight pondered. Okay, I can see that working depending on what you do with it. Maybe avoid all ponies. Spike offered. Too complex, they probably don't know what ponies are. I was thinking more along the lines of don't eat food, Twilight offered. Wouldn't that mean they would choose to eat things that are not food? Like buildings and ponies. Rarity pointed out, making Twilight wince as she considered it. Veto. Spike stated. Agreed. Twilight nodded. I must say you are surprisingly calm for this situation, particularly considering that Princess Celestia is going to be here soon. Rarity added as Twilight winced again. Twilight muttered, shifting her hooves in place as she fidgeted. You forgot she was coming, didn't you? Rainbow Dash deadpanned. Well, I got so caught up in the research. Twilight began. It's fine, if we don't figure it out, the princess can do her own heavy lifting for once. Spike scoffed. Spike! Twilight yelled. What? Oh, I'm sorry, was I not supposed to voice my opinion out loud so you could keep that infallible princess fantasy that you're trying to build back up? Spike growled. Well, tough, we've been over this, Twilight, that's not healthy coping. Plus you two woke me up early, my favorite ice cream place has been cleaned out, we're facing an apocalyptic scenario and I'm supposed to censor myself with all that just so you can repress some bad thoughts about the princess? Not happening. Dude, you hold a grudge for a while. Rainbow Dash commented. I thought she apologized for using you guys in the Nightmare Moon thing. Yeah, she did. To Twilight. I've seen her 3 times since then and she's not said a word about it to me or Ross. Spike scoffed. Everyone apologizes to the big scary dog and the pony, but everyone forgets the dragon. Can't fault your loyalty, I guess. Dash shrugged. And we did come looking to you guys for help, so waiting on the princess isn't that much more of a wait. Though I hate not doing anything. I wanna do something. I agree, we have to try and do something. Rarity fussed. What, like tell every pony that bludgeoning damage does nothing and they need to do either slashing or piercing to hurt them? Spike offered. The other conscious mares looked at Twilight, who simply shrugged. I'm very thorough in my research, Twilight admitted. Angel Bunny, who happened to be nearby still chasing the parasprites that had eaten his breakfast, stopped to stare at Spike as he spoke, the white rabbit's ears twitching. He then tossed his hammer aside, pulling a combat knife from his soft fluffy white fur, and began the pursuit once again. Not to freak any pony, Twilight, out, but we have a golden chariot incoming. Rainbow Dash pointed upward where said chariot glimmered in the sunlight as it approached. Okay, new plan. Twilight twitched, as she started to freak out. Rainbow Dash, you distract them. Rarity, you gather every pony up, and Spike and I will build an exact replica of Ponyville over there for the princess to land in. No trouble at all. Rainbow Dash, can you lift me up to her eye level? Spike stated in monotone. K. Dash blinked, picking up the little dragon as Twilight continued to lose it. While Dash expected Spike to slap some sense into his sister, she was not expecting him to stick his claw into his mouth, coat it with spit, and then jab it in Twilight's ear. Twilight reacted accordingly. Gaya, she shrieked, jerking away from her raised brother, pawing her hooves wildly at her ear. Ew, 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 ew. Disgusting, yet effective. Rarity grudgingly admitted. Fluttershy slowly stood up again with a small groan. Does any pony else hear music? I really think you should see a doctor, darling, you faint quite a bit. Rarity chided. Evidently the parasprites heard music too, as they all stopped and buzzed around looking for the source, fluttering up and down in time to the beat. Music link. Looking for the source, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, and Spike watched as Pinkie Pie made her way through town, strapped down with all the instruments she had been collecting, somehow managing a rather jaunty tune all on her own as a one-pony band. Spike looked at Rarity, Fluttershy, and Rainbow Dash, all of whom shrugged while Twilight continued to flail on the ground trying to clean the dragon slobber out of her ear. The rest of them watched in confusion as the swarm started to drop to the ground and hop after the playing pink party pony. The group was distracted enough. It wasn't until a stallion cleared his throat rather loudly that they turned to see who was behind them. All of them but Spike, and the oblivious Twilight, quickly dropped into a bow as Princess Celestia and a number of guards trotted up behind them. We were going to land outside of town, but there seems to be some sort of commotion going on in Ponyville that might require our intervention. Celestia offered, her chariot guards moving to either side of her as Pinkie Pie's parade of parasprites pounced past. One of the bugs took a moment to glide down and land on the princess's wing. What is this? Celestia looked at the little bug, smirking as it chid at her. That is quite adorable. No! Twilight screamed out, leaping at the princess and snatching the bug away from her, doing her best to throttle the offending bug as the guards all dog-piled on her to keep the princess safe. Celestia and her remaining guards blinked in confusion as Rarity, Fluttershy, and Rainbow Dash face-hooved. Spike simply let out a long-suffering sigh. So how bad is it this time? Celestia muttered to Spike as Twilight tried to bury the bug in the dirt while the guards that tackled her had difficulty restraining her as they were rather confused as to what she was even doing. It just started when you showed up. She'll calm down when she finds out Pinkie Pie fixed it. Then she'll freak out again 'cause Pinkie Pie fixed it. Spike offered. Well, I'm sure you and Ross can deal with her, you've had practice. Has there been some sort of problem in town otherwise? Celestia raised her eyebrow, looking around, seeing a number of wrecked gardens, but no real damage. Just a bit of a infestation, princess, nothing we cannot deal with. Rarity placated before looking over to the Pinkie parade. Evidently. Seems to be going around. Philadelphia is having some sort of issue as well. I simply stopped by to tell everyone that I couldn't stay as I need to go see what is happening there. Celestia let out a small sigh. Luna is already in the city and I fear what actions she might take to correct whatever the issue is. Sisters, am I right? Spike scoffed and Celestia chuckled. Indeed, Spike. Thank you for taking care of yours as well as you have. Celestia offered. I'll be sure to send a care package of gems for all your hard work when I can. Hey, no problem, someone's got to be the sensible one. Spike smiled, puffing out his chest a little. Yes, well, on to duty. Tell Twilight I said hello when she's done playing with, well, whatever that cute thing is. Celestia offered, waving the confused guards trying to restrain Twilight away as the purple mare succeeded in trapping the little bug in a hole under a rock. She nodded to the others before she and her guards went back to her chariot and took off into the sky. Well, this has been a day. And I would like very much for it to be over now. Rarity sighed, her gaze shifting between the long line of bugs heading out into the Everfree after Pinky, and the golden chariot flying off into the sky. No kidding. Dash agreed. I would like very much to go home now. Fluttershy agreed. Yes, well, darling, I am going to come along with you just to make sure that you did not save another of those disgusting things. Rarity stated. That's fair. Fluttershy shrugged and followed along with Rarity. Wanna help me get Twilight back into the house? Spike asked. Yeah, sure, Dash agreed, looking at Twilight, muttering to herself and drawing a ceiling circle around the rock. Got nothing else going on right now. Asterisk. Sweet apple acres. Bork. Ross snapped as he squirmed in the ropes. Don't give me that, I dunno what ya said, but I know that tone. I ain't got time to watch and make sure ya don't eat another tree's worthy apples. I'll come and get ya down when we got everything secure from tha bugs, Applejack called, trotting off. Wouldn't have had to do this if ya didn't make a beeline for that trees the second ya got here. Ross growled before slumping in his bindings. All he wanted was a few apples, and the moment he went for a few, Applejack had hog-tied him and strapped him to the post before slapping an old coat and a hat on him, leaving him mounted like a old scarecrow. Clearly the farm mare still held a grudge about the fence he had broken. Author's note. This took way longer than I liked, though the ending in the show felt rushed too. Epilogue coming, then on to the next chapter. End author's note. End chapter 60. Swarm of 456 years. Part 3.